Welcome to Being That Girl Boss, the podcast by girl bosses for girl bosses, where we talk about pop culture, the internet, and business with some amazing and inspiring women from all different walks of life. Hey, what's up, you guys, and welcome back to Being That Girl Boss. Today's episode is episode 2 of the Female Filmmaker series. I am so excited for this. Again, you guys are going to love our guest. She's so amazing. I'm so excited. So I'm not going to drag it on too much. Let's get into the interview, and I'll be back afterwards to chat with you. Okay, guys. So I am back with an amazing filmmaker as part of my 3-part Female Filmmaker series. Why don't you go and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Rebecca Shoptaw. I just graduated from college. I'm currently doing an MFA in film. And I make a lot of queer short films and web series on the internet.
That's amazing. So when I reached out to people for interviews, how did you feel about that? Because, I mean, I would be a little apprehensive if somebody was just like, hey, can I interview a female filmmaker? How did you feel?
I mean, I do think it kind of speaks to the experience of being a female filmmaker, to be honest, because anytime I see anything like that, I'm just like, yeah, sure, go for it. Because finding opportunities is always a tricky thing. So whenever something presents itself, I'm especially now trying to just encourage myself to just, unless it seems suspect in some way, unless it seems like it's going to be like twisted to some agenda I don't necessarily agree with, I'm just like, yeah, sure, let's do it.
So how did you get into filmmaking? Because everybody has their own story of how they did it. What's yours?
Well, when I was a very small child, me and my friends would put on like fictional plays all the time. We would just like improvise little plays to perform for each other. They were probably really terrible. Luckily, I don't remember them. But my parents had like a video camera, one of those ones that you don't edit, you just like start and stop recording on tape. And so at some point they showed me how to use that. So then I started filming all of our fictional plays. And the big moment the big film moment was when I realized that like you could set up the camera, you could like start it recording, have someone on screen, and then stop it recording, have them run away, and then start again, and it would look like they disappeared. And I just thought that was so cool that I was like, this is it. This is the art form. Though I have not actually had a lot of disappearing people in my work since. A beautiful place to start.
Yeah. So, with that, was it something that you were interested in way before you were handed a camera? Did you always like watch films and you were just like, I wish I could do that? Or was it just kind of like it fell into your lap?
Kind of more the second one. I think a lot of people come to films saying that they loved watching movies so much and they just wanted to make them because they love them. And I watched a lot of movies and I love them, but it didn't really occur to me that that was something that I could do as far as I can remember. I did write like stories and stuff a lot, but filmmaking, that wasn't super interesting to me until I just sort of naturally started doing it. And even now it's like I have trouble. It's easier now because there have been some really amazing films recently, but I always have trouble naming directors that are like inspirations or whatever, because so much of my inspiration has come from what I'm not seeing, that it's less a question of like, I just fell in love with this one director and I wanted to be just like them, because I haven't really had that.
Yeah. Okay. So you said you're studying film and you're going for a master's in film?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. What's it like going to college for film? Because I know there's a huge debate in the filmmaking community about whether or not you need a degree in film to make films.
Well, I've had kind of two very different experiences with that, or I guess several, since I really started studying film when I was quite young. I was really lucky. There were a lot of film classes kind of in my vicinity when I was, like, I took a film summer program in middle school that my middle school offered for some reason, which was fantastic. And then I did like 2 film summer camp things while I was in high school, and then came into college as a film major and took classes there. But I enjoyed some of the summer programs. I had a really hard time in my film program in college. And it's only really now that I've graduated that I've realized how kind of damaging that was for me as a filmmaker, which is interesting. And I do think it has a lot to do with gender and the fact that my stuff is so queer in multiple senses of the word, because I just, even though I was off doing all of these things on the internet and making all of this stuff like outside of class, I didn't feel respected or heard or supported in any way by the film department at my school. There was one professor who was really excellent. He taught like an LGBT cinema class, and he like became my advisor, but he left to teach at Columbia during my sophomore, or right after halfway through my sophomore year of college. And so then after he was gone, it was just like the film department did not really understand what I was doing or why I would want to do it. And just, I felt a lot of like scorn all the time for sort of my non-traditional methods and non-traditional subject matter, which I'm still sort of getting over.
Oh, what school did you study at, and like what was it like studying? Because you touched on kind of that, but like the classes, were they super hard and whatnot? Because I only took a semester of college and then I left, and I was a film major. So
really?
Yeah, I just didn't like college. I thought I could learn more on my own than in class. So like, I want to know how you feel about all of that.
Yeah, well, I went to Yale, which is notoriously, a school with hard classes. I always found the film classes very easy, actually. Mostly, like, ours was a mix of film theory and film production. And the film theory classes were kind of a breeze for me, to be honest, because I am very used to and interested in analyzing films. It comes quite naturally to me. So it was very much just like, watch a film. I suddenly have lots of thoughts, usually about how misogynistic it is. Here we go. And I'm a fast writer and stuff. So those classes were usually some of my easier classes pretty much all the way through. And then the production classes, I really avoided as much as I could. Because that was really where I felt, I mean, the theory classes were fine and pleasant, and some of them were excellent. But the production classes were where I felt very out of place and condescended to, and it was just kind of awful. So I took one the summer after my freshman year, and then I took another one junior year, and didn't have a great experience in either. So then for my senior year, mostly people do theses through the like advanced filmmaking class, which is 2 semesters. But I asked whether I could do my thesis as an independent study, and eventually fought to get permission to do that, which was great. Yeah.
So, since we're on the subject of school, would you recommend aspiring filmmakers going to school?
Yes. If it is the way that you're thinking about film, I guess it really depends on the person, because I am now in an MFA. I'm like a Master of Fine Arts in film. We're literally in our second week of classes, but I love it so much. And it's like the perfect antidote to everything that I went through in undergrad. It's like the program is run pretty much entirely by women. Most of I feel like 50% of people in my class are queer. Like there's a lot of, and not just queer, but like a lot of us are writing films about queer characters, which is super exciting. And it's an environment where I feel so much more comfortable telling the kinds of stories that I actually want to tell. And I feel like I'm surrounded by people who do the same. And it's just like kind of incredible after the, mess of undergrad film. So I feel like for me, at least, it's been and will continue to be a really helpful way of sort of like getting further grounding in, theory and practice, but also just getting like institutional support and recognition and criticism and like, help with growth through my work that I haven't really had before. And also just like a community is a really wonderful thing. So it depends what you want and what you have access to. And how much of a sacrifice, it's like, how much do you want it versus how much of a sacrifice is it for you to do it, as compared to like being able to go into a field right away or work full time somewhere, or, all of that.
Okay. So you kind of talked about how you make queer films and projects. So what are some of the
Yes.
projects you've created?
Well, I think I counted recently, and I've made like 15 queer short films, which is wild. That's been my main focus ever since I realized that I was gay when I was like, I want to say 17, maybe 17, 18, 17. Yeah. And I was making short films for quite a while. And then my junior year of college, the summer before, I had kind of been wanting to tell a longer story because I'm really passionate about like characters and character development over time. And I've always been more of a TV person than a movie person in terms of things that really affect me, because I like watching someone grow over a long period of time and getting very attached and all of that. So I really wanted to do something where I could spend more time with a character. So that's when I started working on the web series Middlemarch, the series, which kind of changed the shape of my filmmaking life in some major ways, and was just an amazing experience. It's, I guess I'll do the whole spiel. It's a gender-bent video blog style adaptation of George Eliot's Victorian novel Middlemarch. It's 70 episodes. It's very gay, and it really tracks like a whole ensemble cast as they go through college and like try to figure out what they want to do with themselves and how to like find meaning in life, and also, you know, romantic drama, of course. So yeah, and that kind of just got me addicted to the web series format. So after that, I did another short film, and then for my thesis. And then I did another web series-ish thing recently called Love Language, which is like a series of 26 silent, I mean, like there is sound, but there's no dialogue, queer short films, each of which is inspired by a word starting with one letter of the alphabet. So it's a kind of like little dictionary. And I'm writing another queer web series now. So that's really, yeah.
So would you say that your web series are your favorite content that you've made, your favorite projects?
It's so, it's such a hard question. I think really I sort of have to judge the web series and short films differently, because they're just on such different scales and kind of doing very different things. I mean, Middlemarch is close to my heart in a way that like nothing else can be, just because it was a year of my life, like filming every weekend. I was in the head, I wrote it all summer, and I was in the heads of the characters all the time. Like it got quite overwhelming. It was just like all I was thinking about for a while, but that was the only way that it got made. So it's like very much a huge part of my life in a different way. And I still, think about and love those characters very deeply. But then also, like, there's a short film I made at the end of high school. It was my first queer short film, which I started writing back when I thought I was straight, which I still find kind of funny. It's just like, oh yeah, I just think representation is really important. Like, all right. And that film has kind of stuck as one of my favorites for ever since I made it, even though not a lot of the people who watch my work have seen it. It's called This Will Linger. And it's sort of like it does a lot of the things that I'm always trying to do in my work. Like it uses very subjective, montagey sequences to convey emotions without saying them out loud. Sort of like experimental techniques towards a purpose. And it has an ensemble cast of characters and stories that overlap, where like one person will be literally an extra or a background character in one story, and then the center of another story, which is kind of like, how life works. And so a lot of the things that I was thinking about there are things that have reappeared and continue to reappear in my work. So yeah, that's another one that's very close to my heart.
Wow. So your queer content, you said you made a short film for your thesis. What is that about?
Well, that's actually sort of my other, I felt like 3 favorites was just too much to have, but that would definitely be the other one. That was a film that it's interesting because after my first film that got like big on YouTube was Recording, which is something I made my freshman year of college, actually for a class that's a somewhat more conventional queer love story. but it's still quite experimental in terms of like incorporating vlog style and stuff. But anyway, but that got big. And after that, a lot of people were like, make a part 2. And so I made a part 2. And that was sort of when I started to feel a responsibility towards kind of fandom, like trying to make, not like in a selling out, like trying to make things that'll make me lots of money. Cause let's be real, none of this is making me money. But trying to make things, like realizing that I could provide representation that people really wanted and that meant a lot to people, and feeling kind of responsibility to make the kinds of representation that I thought that people would really want to see, which is wonderful, but also somewhat limiting. And so my thesis, which is called Untitled Tenderness Project, was for me a film that was less like something I thought would really appeal to a wide audience and more just something that I personally really needed to make. Like, it is queer representation, and it's sort of like, it's a bit of a mission statement for what I do. Realize I should probably summarize it. It's always, I hate doing plot summaries for my work because it's never very plot heavy. But the film is about 2 actors who are in college, and they are both queer. They're both, I think it's never specified. I feel like they're both specifically gay, but like, up for interpretation. And they're always playing like tragic gay roles on stage. And they find that kind of frustrating. And so the story follows them working together to act in / direct a short fictional play that's made up of bits of sort of iconic tragic queer literature. It's like partially Dorian Gray, partially The Song of Achilles, and partially Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, all of which are things that I really love. And so it was sort of, it made it a lot more complicated, where I loved these stories, but also I was wishing, as they were, for something that was not quite so tragic, like to be able to see a vision of a story that ended happily, which was something that I'd been feeling really strongly when I was writing. And I sort of funneled all of my frustration about the lack of happy stories, or having to choose between something that is well written and powerful and something that is like happy. So yeah. And so then the film tracks them sort of grappling with that as they work on this play, and also, fallen in love a little bit. So yeah, it was very much something that I wanted to make, to process the complicated things I was feeling about queer representation. And it was really helpful too, because the actors who I cast for the film were in the same boat as the actors in the film, though they were not in love, as far as I know. And so it was that was one of the best set experiences I've ever had, because I feel like we were all kind of processing that together. It was something that we'd all experienced, and we could sort of talk about it and feel it, and the dialogue was about it. And some of the dialogue came from conversations I'd had with the actors about like what the experience of playing those parts is like. And so it was a really kind of wonderful sort of healing process for me, and I hope also for them. Yeah.
That's amazing. So you talked about your frustration with the lack of queer representation. Do you feel like your content that you're creating is kind of opening up a conversation in the film community about the LGBTQ community, and something that still needs to be talked about, because it's really not touched on, especially in film as of late, even though we have like the films Love, Simon, and like those that claim to be LGBTQ, but they're still not, and they're still very much the straight version of LGBTQ, not the LGBTQ version of LGBTQ. I don't know if that makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah, I feel like my films are attempting to contribute to an ongoing conversation and need, rather than necessarily start one, because I think that is a conversation that has been had in larger and smaller ways for a while now. But this is definitely like my way of not just sort of highlighting the issue, but trying to do my part to help fill in. Like, I think part of what motivates me to keep making films is, not just that I love it and that I have all these ideas that I want to do, but really on a grander scale, I guess, that like I am so frustrated by like the gap where all of this queer representation from like years and years and years should have been, and where it isn't, you know, and all the letters that have been destroyed and misinterpreted, and all the poems that we aren't allowed to say are queer, you know, and all of the historical figures that we aren't supposed to claim, you know, and all of the subtext that has to remain the subtext, you know, coming out of all of that. I'm like, there should be this huge, rich world of representation. And so like, I'm just trying to throw as much as I can out to help contribute to something like that. I do think it's interesting that you bring up Love, Simon, because I actually love that film. And I like, but I do know what you're talking about the like kind of straight queer films. I was originally going to do a written component of my thesis as well as the film. And for that, I didn't end up having time to do it, but like I had divided up queer representation like as is into, I think, 4 categories. Like there's the first one is the like kind of what you were talking about, like what I call like love is love queer representation, where it's basically like this could be a story about straight people, except like a gender was changed. It usually has a happy ending. It's usually not very well written. And it usually like those were the kinds of films that spoke to me when I was very young and first figuring things out. And I was like, oh my God, it's 2 girls and they're in love. This is great. And now I have more trouble with them because it doesn't feel like watching anything resembling my own queer experience. Like that's sort of how I feel about Imagine Me and You, even though it did once mean a lot to me. And I still like, I don't think that was wrong back then, but it's no longer so much what I'm interested in. And then there's, of course, like full-on queer tragedy, which is kind of like the show straight people how bad it is, which has been very valuable for activism in the past. Like, you know, you give people a good tragic story and they see, oh my God, these poor queer people, they're suffering. And then they try to help. And that's not, you know, you can't really on some level find fault with that, but it's also very hard as a queer person to keep watching those stories and being like, all right, cool. This is the only future we're allowed to have. Great, great, great. Good to know. And then there's sort of like a mixed one, which is like, which I call like displaced queerness, where the relationship is like wrong and illicit, but for a different reason. Like it's cheating, or it's a teacher and a student, or some other relationship with a huge age gap, or so that in some way the straight audience can still feel that it is wrong and uncomfortable somehow without being homophobic, if that makes sense. I mean, I don't think it's conscious at all, but like you still get that like, ooh, it's romantic, but it's forbidden sense that always comes with queer romance. But it's not technically because it's queer. But then you have the 4th category, which is what I like to do, and which some films that I really love, I think, do, which is kind of more like poetic queer stories, and queer stories that don't follow Hollywood rules, that don't like take a straight narrative convention and then like change a few things, but just like write their own rules. And tell stories that feel like what it feels like to be queer. I mean, I think that Moonlight is probably one of the best examples of this and one of the most incredible films I've ever seen. Really, like seeing that was like, I've never seen anyone do this before. Huge revelation. I also think Pariah by Dee Reese, which like very few people have seen, is a great example of that kind of storytelling. Even like Cameron Post, which just came out, is I think also kind of within that form of not quite following the expected path. And I would argue that Love, Simon, as much as it is like a, you know, happy-go-lucky teen rom-com, actually does not quite fit into the standard teen rom-com boxes in ways that are very interesting in terms of sort of like character ambiguity and the way that the romance develops, and the various different blues and, you know, I mean, I could go on for a whole podcast about why I think that Love, Simon is actually a really fascinating film. But that was one that I was expecting to feel that first way about and actually ended up seeing some of myself and my experience and being really moved by. So, an exciting time.
Mm-hmm. I feel like one of the films that are kind of like written as like a straight love story that you talked about, but they changed one of the genders is Alex Strangelove on Netflix. It's a Netflix original.
I haven't seen it.
I had so many issues with it. It like claimed it was an LGBT film, but within like the first half an hour, they wrote off bisexuality and said it wasn't actually a thing.
Oh,
and
no.
It was just all around a really bad representation of the LGBTQ community. And as somebody who's ace, it's like, if you think bisexuality isn't real, then you're not going to think what I have is real. And that annoys me, especially because a lot of films, especially like these teen films, are made for you to relate to. And like, it's frustrating that they don't have these sort of like teen films that are about LGBTQ yet. Like, if John Hughes was around, we'd probably have some really amazing ones, because he was he's honestly my favorite director.
Really?
Yeah, I loved his films in the 80s. I loved the way he did them, and I think if he was still around now, then he would have probably done one of the best LGBTQ high school films. Because he just...
go ahead.
Oh, no, you can go.
No, that's so interesting, because I don't... I really do love a lot about John Hughes, and I like a lot of films that are sort of like John Hughes-esque. But I don't, at least in the time when he was working, I have trouble with a lot of his films, actually, because of some representational issues. Like, I know everyone loves The Breakfast Club, but I can never get over the makeover scene. Like, and then also, like, 16 Candles is another one that everyone loves. And I understood it when I saw it, but also, like, I had a scoliosis brace for like 2.5 years. And that was like a big part of my life. And there's a running joke in that film with a girl with a scoliosis brace who, like, hilariously can't do things. And I was like wearing my brace watching this movie, just like, oh, so I'm not the hero, I'm the butt of the joke. Cool.
Yeah.
But I do agree that, like, a John Hughes style movie, or maybe if he was around now and had learned a few things, he could do something in that style that would be really great.
Because like 80s films especially, they got away with so much more than a lot of films now get away with, because humor and the audience at the time was way different than it is now. So like in 16 Candles with Long Dong, I think that's his name, that was humor back then, but now people look at it and it's really controversial because of the way he's portrayed. But I think as time goes on, filmmakers learn to adapt to like what's going on. And with him being one of the best filmmakers I've seen to do like high school type films, I think he would have adapted really well to do these like LGBTQ stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would have been great to see.
It would have been. So, you said you have like a hard time finding other like LGBTQ filmmakers and stuff, but have you found a couple that you really love that create LGBTQ films?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed a lot even the past few years. I think that when I started like really making queer films all the time in like freshman year and like just 2014, 2015, I really couldn't have named many. But things have changed. I've also like discovered more things on the internet, which is great. But like, mainstream director people, not all of them are queer, but there are, like, Dee Reese is incredible. She's the person who did Pariah, which I love. There's this film Mosquita y Mari, which I watched in sophomore year, I think, for a class, which I love. I love a lot of Todd Haynes' stuff. I mean, Carol, obviously, but also Velvet Goldmine, which a lot of people have not seen, which I love dearly. Cameron Post, which just came out, incredible. I really love Simon. And then, I don't know, there are a lot of people on the internet doing great things. I don't know a lot of people who do the like short film thing that I do. But I know web series creators like Caitlin Alexander. Did you ever watch Carmilla?
I think I did.
Yeah, well, they played La Fontaine on Carmilla, and now they're like they made a web series called Couple-ish, and they're making short films. And well, are they making short films? They're making like a prequel-y thing and a music video, and they're just like making all kinds of like very needed queer content, which is great. And yeah, there are a lot of, I mean, probably too many to name, but a lot of good web series people around making things. I feel like a lot of the future of queer representation is happening on the internet.
Yeah.
I'm a little biased, but I think that representation has gone a lot further than it's been allowed to go in the mainstream or even in indie films in the internet, because there are so few barriers to entry. Yeah. It also means that like the responsibility for representation is much more intense, because there are like, you're the one making all the calls. So if you make a bad call, you can't say, oh, that was the studio. Or like there are a few web series that have done the thing like, oh, none of these sexualities are like canonically mentioned in the series because we had to like cut them, but like here's the actual sexualities. And and that's the thing we're always calling out mainstream films for doing. So it's like you really don't have an excuse for that. Like you can't say that your production company wanted you to write it out, if it's just you and some friends. That was a choice that you made. But a lot of people really are doing excellent stuff in that realm. So yeah.
So what's it like being a queer female filmmaker in such a straight male dominated entertainment world?
Difficult. I think, it's really true across a lot of marginalizations in film, though everything acts and affects you in different ways. I think that often it's very easy to look at it as just like, the men have it easy and the women have it hard. And it's like, well, okay, but like I am also white and I'm also like privileged enough that I haven't had a lot of barriers to entry that a lot of people who don't have the same kind of privilege have had. I went to Yale, like I have my own camera, like we're doing pretty well. And like that in and of itself, that plus the like whiteness has given me a lot of opportunities that have been denied to a lot of other people. And like, that's something that I think is important to recognize, even as I'm like talking about how difficult it is. Both things are true. And I think in terms of how it's manifested for me, it's a lot of like not feeling like feeling like you have to prove yourself 500 times over for everything that you do. Like, I think that often I'm trying to get past this, but it gets sort of ingrained that like whenever you're pitching something to someone or suggesting something or proposing something, you sort of brace for impact. Like you come in like sure that the person is not going to understand and not going to care and not going to think that what you're doing is worth doing. And you get condescended to a lot. You get a lot of people not understanding or appreciating why you would want to do what you want to do. Like, it seems a bit, the feeling that I've gotten a lot is that my work is like a fun, cute, personal, like passion project thing that I like doing, but it's not like serious filmmaking, both because it's queer and because like, happy endings. I think that if it was queer and it was people sobbing and dying and, just having a tragic old time, it would be a lot more legible as like important art than I think, like cute queer love story is like, oh, what nice little probably, wish fulfillment fluff that is. And it's like, well, actually been doing a lot of thinking about, culture and representation and the implications of all of these things. And it's all very specifically intended. But even if it wasn't, I don't think that like fun, cute, happy stories are of any less value than like the 500th Tarantino remake by, some straight white boy doing film. Like, different people have different interests in what they want to do. And I think the more different kinds of films that are getting made, the better, rather than everything trying to fit into one frame of like, this is what matters as a film. Yeah. But I don't know. I've definitely felt like certain things just are impossible for me. And I'm gradually getting over some of that, but it's like Hollywood would not want me, has been my perception for a long time, unless I just sort of become someone else. But like, because I mean, as a like white queer woman, maybe if I like direct a lot of straight people stuff and like I'm queer, but in one of those, you know, like when people are talking about a queer film and they're like, yeah, you know, it's about this gay guy, but it's not like about how he's gay. Like I would need to be that kind of person. Like, oh, she's queer, but like, that's not really like the most important thing about her. Whereas my work now is like, she's queer. Everything she does is queer. The air she breathes is gay. Her house is gay. All her friends are gay. You know, it's just like you really, you can't. I mean, and my issue with that kind of reading of queer films too is like, not gay is, you know, by our limited cultural whatever, is straight. So like whenever you say, oh yeah, but it's not about how she's gay, it starts to feel like you're saying, yeah, you know, she could be straight and everything would be the same. And it's like, my queerness is such an important and interesting part of me, and something that leads me to a lot of interesting thoughts and ideas and work, and has in many ways changed the shape of my life for the better, realizing that that's a huge part of who I am. That like, I don't want to be, well, I can understand people who have other priorities. Like, I don't want to put that to the side to like get work, or to do something that would be easier to sell or more palatable. I kind of just want to keep doing my thing, and working in like less, you know, authoritative capacities on other things that I'm not necessarily, you know, like I do love doing like cinematography and like assistant directing and stuff. And I'll film whatever straight person movie, you know, if you pay me, like I'll show up, I'll make some pretty stuff. Like I'm no qualms about that. But for my own work that I'm, you know, writing and directing, I want to, you know, I believe in what I'm doing and want to keep doing it. But it's often kind of like, it's often felt like an uphill battle to do that.
Yeah. So what advice would you have for somebody who wants to get into queer filmmaking but might not exactly know how to start?
Well, I think that like the biggest advice I can give, which is a kind of advice that a lot of people give, but it's really true, especially in this case, is to just start. Like, use literally whatever you have. Like if you have a phone and iMovie, make a film like the next free weekend you have. Get two friends who can't act, write a terrible script, film it, edit it, hate it, whatever, then make something else. Like part of why I'm able to do what I do now is that like I made a bunch of really silly, ridiculous, I don't even know what the hell they were, kind of films in like elementary and middle school. Like I went through that, but there were some things I started doing then. Like I did some montages, and I did some like interesting stuff with cutting, and I did some exploring with handheld cinematography, so that by the time I got into high school, I was already doing things that felt more like what I'm interested in now. But like, it's not, you don't just pick up a camera and get to exactly where you want to be right away. But like, finding, one of the biggest things that's helped me is using what I have and like making things that would not be better if they were made in Hollywood, basically, that like require or involve the constraints. Like weird montage, you know, like if you don't really have actors who can handle dialogue very well, or you can't really record sound well, great. Like make a music video, do a weird montage with voiceover. Like, you know, there's a lot of ways that you can do things that are not like trying to and failing to be the like Hollywood ideal, but just are succeeding to be exactly what they are. And I think that that's kind of always the most important thing. And really, for queer film, kind of a metaphor for queerness in a way. At least that's how I've always thought about it. Like, you stop trying to approximate this straight ideal that you're never actually going to be, and just pay attention to who you actually are and what you're actually interested in, you know, how you actually want to dress and look and talk. And suddenly like a whole world opens up. And it's incredibly freeing. And I think that following that same trajectory with film, especially as a queer filmmaker with so few examples out in the world, instead of trying to make something that looks like something that you've seen, just figure out like what you can do with whatever it is that you have, and just do that. It's the best way to start.
Okay. So how can people find you and your amazing content and follow you and maybe reach out to you for more advice?
Yeah, so I would absolutely please reach out about advice. I love, probably a little bit too much, I love giving advice. But yes, I am on YouTube / most places as just my name, Rebecca Shoptaw. Middlemarch, you can search YouTube or Twitter or wherever for Middlemarch the series, it'll pop up. And then my at in various places like Twitter and Instagram is Rebecca_ish, ISH. But if you search for Rebecca Shoptaw, you can also find me pretty easily. Yeah, all my films and the web series Love Language that I mentioned that's alphabetical are on my YouTube channel, that's Rebecca Shoptaw, and then Middlemarch is on its own channel, which is called Middlemarch the series. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for spending the time to talk to me and to tell my audience a bit more about yourself. Everybody need to go check her out as soon as you can. Go watch all of her films and her projects and let her know how amazing she is.
Oh, and thank you for this. This has been so wonderful. I'm so glad that you just happened to post in this group, and that I never check these things, but I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. And now we're here. So yeah, this has been really a really wonderful interview process, and so lovely. A wonderful conversation process. Sorry. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. So I hope you guys love that interview as much as I did. Make sure you go follow Rebecca. She's so amazing. I love her content, and she was so great to talk to. So you should definitely go check her out, and stay tuned for the rest of our episode. This week's small creator shout out goes to Lexi D'Angelo of At the Brand Party. She is so amazing. I'm obsessed with her feed. She has a puzzle feed, and she's just so cool, and what she does is so cool. She's a website designer, and I love everything she does. She's so cool. So like I said, she's At the Brand Party. You should go check her out and see how amazing and inspiring what she does is. Yeah, she's so good, guys. You just need to follow her. So check her out. She'll be linked down below. This week's Song of the Week goes to Simplify by Young the Giant. I am obsessed with this song, and it's so good. And I just get so pumped listening to it, so I hope you guys like it too. It'll be linked in the link tree with our playlist that you can listen to listen to any song that has been mentioned on the podcast previously. Super cool, super love it. So check it out once you're done listening to this episode, because you don't want to miss all of the awesomeness that we're still going to be talking about. This week's social media tip of the week is actually one that some of you may have feelings about. So once I tell you, make sure you head over to Instagram.com/BTGirlBossPod. It's again linked in the description of the episode, so you can let me know your feelings on it. But mine is, if you do an email list, try also doing a Facebook Messenger bot. They're great for pairing with your Facebook page, so you can post and share things as an email newsletter, but in a more casual way to more people who might like your Facebook page but don't take any other action. It's super simple to set up. I use ManyChat, and it's just really a great idea. So I definitely suggest trying that. So this week's media tip of the week is to try a Facebook Messenger bot in place of or with your email newsletter. So I hope you guys like this episode. Like I said, I really loved it, and I'm having so much fun with this female filmmaker series, and I hope you guys are too. Let me know your feelings on doing little podcast series during the podcast. Again, you could always hit me up on Instagram at BTGirlBossPod, or on Twitter or Instagram at EmilyHesterNCS. Everything will be linked in a link tree in the description of the episode. It'll be super easy for you to find it. It's just linkter.ee/PTGirlBossPod, where you can find absolutely everything that's mentioned in this episode, from our playlist to our merch, which I haven't mentioned yet, but segue, we have merch, guys, and we just launched our vintage design merch. I'm obsessed with it. I spent so many hours with my best friend designing this for you guys. It's so great. I definitely think you will all love it, so you should definitely go check that out. And if you use the code WitchLady at checkout, you get 10% off of your purchase, which is super cool. You guys get it for really a great price with that. You get it for a great price anyways. It's only $25 for a shirt, so it's really good. I love this merch so much. I even have mine on the way. I think you all will love it. Other than that, we have a freebie if you guys want it. It'll also be linked in the link tree, where basically it's a free branding kit that you guys can edit on Canva. It's very simple. There are instructions once you open the link. And from there, you can also get a free Instagram puzzle feed if that's something that interests you. All we ask in return is that you answer a survey for us that we have. It's really an easy, great way to get some feedback from you guys while offering you guys something. So it's really great. Other than that, we have a Patreon or even listener support through our host. If you would like to help us make this podcast run, it actually is really hard sometimes to run a podcast without funding, and that's what we're currently doing. We have funding here and there, but nothing substantial. So with Patreon and with listener support, for a small monthly fee, you can actually support us and help us out, and it's just really amazing. We have special perks for our Patreon listeners and for our listener support listeners. So if you are one of those people, if you want to become one of those people, in the link tree you will have the link, so go ahead and check it out. Other than that, we have the rest of our female filmmaker series. We have one more episode to go that I'm so excited for, that I think you guys will love. It's very inspirational for me, and it's just all around great. So definitely check that out when it comes out next week. Next week we also have our Music Monthly episode, which again has changed format since we used to do it, but it's still really amazing, and I hope you guys all like it. There's a special Music Monthly playlist that is linked in the link tree right now. It's the September, so just check it out. It's really great. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Like I said, BT Girl Boss Pod, Instagram, at Emily Hester NC, it's Instagram, Twitter. Make sure you hit me up. Let me know if you're liking the episode. If you really like the episode, make sure you go and give it a 5-star rating on whatever platform you're listening to, if it lets you use the rating system. It really helps us with SEO and all of that fun stuff that I will get into in a whole episode about podcasting. So if you do, just let us know on your listening platform. Also, again, listener support, it helps a lot. Just so you know, we love everybody who listens to the podcast, and we would love it even more if they would help support us. But yes, I hope you guys liked it. I will be back next week with a new episode. Bye!